The stars had been a chilly, distant glimmer above, a good-sized and empty expanse of nothingness. Captain Sarah Blake stood on the commentary deck of the flagship, her hands clasped tightly in the back of her back. She was lost in thought, her eyes fixed on the endless void that stretched earlier than them. It had been months since the Zorathians had arrived, their substantial armada of warships blockading out the mild of the suns, their floor forces slaughtering the whole lot that moved. Earth was a death global, its human beings huddled in bunkers and underground shelters, expecting the give-up to come back. But Captain Blake had sworn to present them desire, to show them that there has been still a destiny really worth fighting for. And so she had accumulated a small group of squad eyes, scientists, and engineers, men and women who refused to accept defeat. They had give you a plan, a determined gamble to save their world. A plan that hinged on a single, slim thread, a rare and treasured element found simplest on Earth. The remark deck became cramped and dimly lit, its walls decorated with the diminished remnants of posters and graffiti. A small hatch brought about a cramped sleeping quarters where a number of the team took turns resting. The air changed into thick with the smell of sweat and worry, however Captain Blake slightly noticed. Her mind turned into somewhere else, along with her males and females, and the not possible mission that lay before them. Captain, came a soft voice from behind her. I suppose it is time. Lieutenant James shook his head, his expression grim. We've checked and rechecked the calculations. The transfer collection should begin in 10 minutes. The two of them fell into step, walking silently in the direction of the control room. As they moved via the dimly lit corridors, Captain Blake could not help however surprise in the event that they could ever see the light of day once more. But she failed to permit that idea slow her down. For her, there has been no preference however to preserve fighting, to hold pushing forward. And so she led her team into the coronary heart of darkness, decided to deliver hope returned to their demise global. The manage room became a hive of activity, the air thick with the hum of computer systems and the murmur of voices. Captain Blake took her place at the center of all of it, her fingers dancing throughout the controls with practiced ease. She glanced at Lieutenant James, who changed into busy coordinating with the scientists and engineers on any other console. Are we ready? She requested, her voice consistent. Everything's in place, he answered. The countdown has all started. She nodded, her eyes by no means leaving the readouts on the primary display screen. For the beyond few months, they have been running on this moment, this one risk to show the tide. The Zorathians had stripped Earth of its resources, its humans, its very soul. But they had by no means predicted this. The human race had constantly been exact at locating ways to live to tell the tale against impossible odds. And now, with this weapon, they could just have a combating danger. The countdown reached 0, and the room fell silent. Captain Blake took a deep breath, her heart racing. Then she tapped some commands into the console, and the switch started out. A tiny stream of records, no larger than a speck of dust, left the ship and headed closer to the planet beneath. It changed into a sensitive operation, fraught with hazard. A single mistake may want to suggest disaster for all of them, but she trusted her crew, depended on the plan. And so she waited, her eyes constant at the readouts, her heart in her throat. The transfer finished without a hitch, and the team erupted into cheers. Captain Blake allowed herself a brief smile before sobering. The subsequent step turned into the most important. They had to get the element back to Earth. They should infiltrate the Zorathian stronghold, a heavily fortified fortress constructed into the coronary heart of their capital metropolis. It might be a suicide assignment, but it became their only chance. They needed to succeed, for the sake in their international. Their ship, the Retribution, changed into small and nimble, designed for stealth in place of brute pressure. It were changed to appear like a Zorathian fighter craft, its hull painted with the enemy's markings. As they approached the stronghold, Lieutenant James spoke into their helmet comms. We're nearly there, Captain. The element is steady within the delivery pod. Do you want to begin the very last method? Captain Blake swallowed hard. Let's do it, she responded, her voice constant. But do not forget, we must be quick and silent. We cannot have the funds for any errors. The Retribution glided via the nighttime sky, its sensors scanning for any signs and symptoms of detection. The stronghold loomed larger with each passing second, a large castle of stone and steel jutting from the floor like a cruel, twisted claw. Captain Blake felt a shiver of fear down her spine as they drew closer. However, she pushed it apart. There turned into no room for fear now. They had to recognition at the project, on bringing desire, returned to their global. As they neared the stronghold, the crew started out their final preparations. The delivery pod changed into armed and prepared to fireplace its self-destruct mechanism if important. Weapons were checked and rechecked, and every crew member ran via their assigned responsibilities one closing time. Captain Blake sat inside the Deliver's small command center, monitoring the readouts and preparing to give the order to strike. She knew that after they breached the stronghold, there could be no turning again. It could be a combat to the death, and they might most effective hope that their abilities and resolution would be enough to see them through. The Retribution glided silently through a slim corridor carved into the mountainside, its sensors scanning for any signs and symptoms of motion or alarm. Lieutenant James, on the helm, changed into centered carefully on her devices, her hands dancing throughout the controls. The relaxation of the team have been scattered at some point of the ship, each organized to man their stations and do their part in the upcoming battle. As they approached the entrance to the stronghold, Captain Blake felt her heart pound in her chest. However, she forced herself to stay calm and on top of things. She had educated for this second her whole lifestyles, and she or he would no longer let her group down now. The Retribution slowed to a prevent just outside the entrance to the stronghold, its camouflage structures disguising it as a Zorathian fighter craft. Captain Blake gave the order to open the shipping pod bay doorways, and the team prepared to release the transport pod containing the stolen detail. The pod floated freed from the ship, maneuvering toward the doorway to the stronghold. Captain Blake watched it via her view display screen, her heart in her throat. The pod touched down on the ground and started its gradual move slowly closer to the entrance. They have been nearly there. Inside the stronghold, the alarm sounded. Zorathian squad eyes raced closer to the doorway, their weapons on the geared up. The transport pod endured its crawl, its camouflage structures doing their first class to blend in with the rocky terrain. Captain Blake waited till the remaining viable moment earlier than ordering the Retribution to engage. The fighter craft hurtled toward the stronghold, its gun systems blazing. The crew fought with a determined ferocity, their education and backbone pushing them to the limits. The war was fierce, however they were relentless. They had come too far to fail now. Captain Blake watched as the shipping pod subsequently reached the entrance to the stronghold. With a very last burst of speed, it disappeared inside. She knew that the element become now within their hold close. The Retribution persevered its attack, its crew combating with a determination that bordered on insanity. The Zorathian forces had been crushed, their defenses crumbling below the onslaught. With a final flurry of gunfire and explosions, the battle came to an give up. The Retribution emerged successful, the stolen element effectively in its possession. The struggle changed into far from over. However, with this triumph, humanity had simply been given a fighting chance. Captain Blake allowed herself a small, effective smile as she ordered the team to prepare for their go-back adventure. They nonetheless had an extended street in advance of them, but they had taken the primary, crucial step. As the Retribution limped returned to their hidden base, Captain Blake couldn't assist, however, reflected the price in their victory. So many lives were lost on each aspects, and the planet itself became in shambles. The Zorathian Empire was teetering, getting ready to fall apart. However, the rebels were far from secure. They knew that the Zorathians would no longer surrender without problems, and they have been bracing themselves for an extended, bloody guerrilla battle. Still, Captain Blake couldn't assist but experience a feel of delight and accomplishment. They had made a difference, and that they had proven that even the most effective empire will be introduced down via the power of determination and team spirit. Once they'd again to their base, Captain Blake called a meeting of her most relied-on officers. They wanted to devise their subsequent circulate carefully. They could now not afford to be on the defensive. They needed to strike a decisive blow in opposition to the Zorathians before they may regroup and regain their strength. After hours of heated debate, they got here up with a bold plan. They might infiltrate the Zorathian capital itself and thieve the element again from under their enemies' noses. It was a volatile move, but they felt it become their first-class hazard at sooner or later bringing peace to their tortured global. Captain Blake selected her most professional officers to lead the challenge. Lieutenant James, the ship's professional pilot, would fly the Retribution into the heart of the Zorathian capital. Dr. Owens, the crew's gifted scientist, might disable the planetary shields to allow them to land unnoticed, and Sergeant Johnson, their fearless ground commander, could lead the strike crew at the ground when they had landed. The relaxation of the team would continue to be in the back of, geared up to guard their deliver and their home at a second's word. As the Retribution organized for the mission, Captain Blake should experience the weight of responsibility pressing down upon her. She knew that the success of the undertaking rested squarely on her shoulders, and that failure might suggest now not handiest the give-up of her crew, however the cease of any hope for freedom and peace on their world. But she also knew that she turned into organized to face that responsibility, and that her team changed into ready to comply with her into the fireplace. With a deep breath and a constant hand, she gave the order to proceed with the operation. The time for speaking become over. Now it turned into time to fight for his or her destiny. The infiltration of the capital metropolis went off without a hitch. Lieutenant James, regardless of going through extreme hearth from Zorathian opponents, expertly navigated the Retribution through the treacherous skies, and Dr. Owens's technical prowess turned into extra than healthy for the planetary shields. They landed the deliver simply outside the metropolis limits, and inside minutes, Sergeant Johnson and his strike crew have been at the ground, transferring hastily and silently in the direction of their goal, the Zorathian palace. As they approached the palace, Captain Blake and her group could see the glow of the details containment discipline piercing the nighttime sky. It became both a beacon of hope and an image of the tyranny they fought against. They knew that they needed to attain it, irrespective of the value. The Zorathians, but, had been waiting for an assault, and the palace turned into heavily fortified. The rebels might have to combat their way through wave after wave of enemy soldiers in the event that they were to have any chance of accomplishing the element. Captain Blake and Sergeant Johnson led the fee, their weapons blazing as they took down Zorathian infantrymen with particular, deadly efficiency. Dr. Owens and Lieutenant James protected their retreat, offering overlaying fireplace from above even as the strike crew fought their way via the palace grounds. It changed into a brutal, bloody conflict, but the rebels refused to give up. They knew that every step they took brought them in the direction of their aim, and with each enemy soldier they felled, they grew stronger. Finally, after hours of relentless combating, they reached the chamber in which the element became being held. Captain Blake signaled to her team, and they burst into the room, guns at the prepared. The Zorathian guards, caught off shield, were quickly crushed. Captain Blake herself engaged the chamber's protection machine, disabling it with a few deft faucets on a control panel. As the last of the Zorathian guards fell, she grew to become to her team and shouted, "Ere it's ours. Let's get out of here." With the detail of their ownership, They made their break out from the palace, fleeing via a secret tunnel that led back to the Retribution. The sound of explosions and gunfire can be heard in the distance as they raced via the tunnel, but they knew that the rest of the rebels might maintain the road until they might get again to protection. Once they were aboard the ship, Lieutenant James ignited the engines, and they roared to existence, propelling them into the nighttime sky. The Zorathian capital fell in the back of them, a distant speck of mild fading into the darkness. Captain Blake and her crew had performed it. They had stolen the element returned from the Zorathians, and with it, they'd given wish to their humans.